The incomprehensible size of space and the indescribable nature of the elements that exist within it are absolutely mind-blowing. The experience of seeing these mysteries from close range has a lasting effect on the astronauts. But of course, not all of these experiences are equal. In fact, some of these memories are so eerie that they haunt the astronauts for life. Join us in today's video as we reveal the strangest and most mysterious things ever seen in space by astronauts. Unidentified objects. Back in the early 1980s, a US Air cosmonaut named Vladimir Vasilyevich Kovalyonok was rounding up his daily tasks around the lower Earth orbit when he decided to peep outside the porthole of the spacecraft. What he saw terrified him to his bare bones. After many years of constant debate over what these creatures could be, the cosmonaut tagged them as unidentifiable objects whose physical movements defied the laws of physics. According to his accounts, these mythical objects had an elliptical shape and a rapid rotation, which is quite abnormal according to normal human calculations. After a few seconds of observing the scene, a golden explosion occurred, which was quickly followed by another strange detonation. At this point, two golden shimmering spheres appeared just before a white smoke formation filled the area and the mysterious objects disappeared into thin air. Kovalyonok's mythical sighting was no doubt surprising. But admittedly, it's not our first encounter with strange objects and elements in space. Back in May 1969, while humanity was preparing to land on the moon for the first time, two astronauts, Tom Stafford and John Young, were sent to the moon's orbit to explore the region ahead of the iconic visit of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. As Tom and John stared at the Earth-facing side of the moon from about 9 miles away, their headphones picked up weird sounds. This was a situation they hadn't prepared for, and even officials at the control room couldn't explain what was producing the sound or where it originated. More interestingly, this melodious moon music lasted for over 1 hour, but still, scientists couldn't trace its origin. But of course, they had to come up with some theories or explanations of the mysterious sound. So after some behind-the-scenes scientific work, an official statement was released describing the sound as radio interference. But was this really the case? Well, we don't know, and perhaps we'll never know. UFOs at the moon landing. Eventually, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would land on the moon, despite the strange noises detected earlier by the two scout astronauts that circled the lunar orbit a few months earlier. In fact, following our first touchdown, more astronauts would go on to explore the lunar surface multiple times from close range, and many of them actually did sight indescribable things that weren't really reported. For example, in a controversial book called Our Cosmic Ancestors, former head of NASA's communications system, MAURICE CHATELAIN, inferred that we might not be the first civilization to occupy Earth. In fact, MAURICE believes that some of these extraterrestrial intelligences may have communicated with humans during the early phase of our existence and during the construction of iconic structures like the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Going further, the former senior official at NASA dedicated a section of this interesting book to explain an odd occurrence that wasn't widely reported during our first moon landing. According to his account, as Neil Armstrong was descending from the ladder of the spacecraft, two UFOs, otherwise known as unidentifiable objects, dashed across the lunar surface. Neil Armstrong was fully focused on the task at hand, so he had no idea what was going on. But his partner Buzz Aldrin was well placed to see and capture these UFOs. Furthermore, the radio system experienced a period of 2 minutes of silence after Neil Armstrong touched down on the lunar surface. NASA officials involved in the mission say it's due to a glitch in the system caused by the overheating of one of the television cameras deployed for the mission. But even to this day, there are questions around the execution of the mission as regards some of the stories that were told to the public. As a matter of fact, some netizens have called out NASA, accusing the prominent space agency of hoarding pictures of the UFOs that were sighted on that day from the public. Again, there isn't really much evidence that confirms that Neil Armstrong and his colleagues saw elements or creatures that are of the third kind. But some of the actions from NASA and its officials suggest that something might be fishing in the background. ERIE KNOX. According to the confessions we've explored in this video, most of our encounters with strange beings from the outside world have reportedly occurred during first-time visits by astronauts. And the first incursion of China into space wasn't any different. In his attempt to become the first Chinese person in space, Yung Liwei boarded the Shenzhou 5 spacecraft. While his journey past the Kármán line was rather quiet, he couldn't say the same thing about his stay in the lower Earth orbit. Yung reportedly heard mysterious noises which, according to him, sounded like when someone tapped the body panel of the spacecraft with a hammer. Following his report, many people were quick to mention that space is a vacuum with no conductive medium to transmit sound. In other words, they believed Yung was probably hallucinating when he heard these unexplainable sounds. But somehow, 2 other Chinese astronauts confirmed that they heard similar sounds during subsequent missions to space. Galactic Snake. During his illustrious career at NASA, Franklin Story Musgrove travelled to space 6 times. In fact, the well-respected astronaut is believed to have spent nearly 2 months in space cumulatively between 1983 and 1996. But during one of his trips in 1994, he saw something that looked like a snake in space. On another visit, the American astronaut confirmed that he saw the same mythical creature again, which increased his conviction that we are not alone in the universe. Mysterious light phenomena. Leroy Chow was another astronomer who had a conviction that other creatures exist in the universe. His conviction was further strengthened by a personal experience that happened back in 2005, when Chow was commander of the International Space Station ISS for 6.5 months. On one occasion, while repairing antennas in the lower Earth orbit, Leroy Chow spotted several luminous objects, symmetrically arranged in a linear formation. But before he could get a grasp of what had happened, the objects disappeared into the infinite expanse of the universe. Strangely formed UFOs. Naturally, when we think of UFOs, we think of flying saucers. But in reality, UFOs could be any shape. We got to know this when Ed White and James McDivitt, 2 astronauts who performed the first ever US walk in space, found a strange object flying with strange characteristics over Hawaii. This strange element was described as a metallic object with a glowing, limb-like fuselage sticking out from behind. On another occasion in 1991, an unarmed astronaut was carrying out a routine mission in space when he stumbled on an elongated structure. Thankfully, he had the presence of mind to capture it on camera. After observing the images shot by the mystery astronaut, NASA officials played down his suggestions, claiming there was nothing more than space debris. However, this unnamed astronaut insisted that what he saw was not space debris. But then again, it's his word against that of the most recognized space agency in the world. It's always going to be difficult to believe him. Gordon Cooper sighting. On the 15th of May 1963, Gordon Cooper joined the Mercury Atlas 9 mission for his first ever journey into space. And having performed exceptionally well during that trip, he was listed as part of the core team for the GEMINI program 2 years later. But perhaps the most memorable event he witnessed in space happened in May 1963, when his spacecraft was observing the last of the 22 orbits of the Earth, when, all of a sudden, he spotted a shimmering green object heading towards him with extreme momentum. Ironically, Cooper's claims were confirmed by officials at the Machia tracking station in Western Australia, who picked up signals of bewildering objects. But sadly, the confirmation wasn't enough for NASA to officially confirm the existence of UFOs.